Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Education meeting for December 14th. Will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our meeting again. The first order of business we have is the high school students report. So would you like to fill us in on what's going on?
Good evening. The Players Club just announced that they will be performing...
Could you move closer to the mic or move the mic closer to you?
Good evening. The Players Club just announced that they will be performing Legally Blonde as this year's spring musical. Auditions will be held January 8th, and everyone is welcome to try out. On December 10th, the junior officers in EGO hosted the annual student volleyball tournament. Since we weren't able to have this popular event last year due to social distancing restrictions, students were eager to sign up and create a team with their friends. Teams of up to 12 students went head-to-head, competing against their classmates. School spirit and teamwork was shown by all, and it was a very fun event to be a part of and watch. Orchestra, band, and chorus recently had their winter concerts. Many holiday pieces were played to get the school in the holiday spirit. The sophomore class is holding a spirit fundraiser. Those who donate will receive an Eastchester Eagles ribbon. Donations can be made through My Payment Plus or by mailing it to the high school. All money raised will go to the class of 2024 and the Play for 10 Foundation. EGO, with help from student volunteers, recently decorated the cafeteria for the December holidays. The cheery display of Christmas trees, menorahs, dreidels, and snowflakes get Eastchester High School ready for the holiday season. Poetry Club hosted a virtual open mic night last Friday where students got the opportunity to share poetry that they love from a book, online, or even ones they wrote themselves. All were welcome to listen and participate in this event.
Going Green hosted their first snack sale last week during all lunch periods to support the organization Team Seas. For every dollar that was made and soon to be donated, 1 pound of trash will be removed from oceans and large bodies of water. Their fundraiser was very successful, hoping to make a larger difference. Also, at their upcoming meeting this Friday, committee members from the Eastchester Environmental Sustainability Committee will be coming in to talk about a new composting system in the town. All students are welcome to learn about this form of recycling and how to better our community. This past weekend, students from the Habitat for Humanity Club were able to volunteer and help a 97-year-old World War II veteran, Fred Plastini. His house was flooded during Hurricane Ida, and students were able to assist in installing new floors and walls for Mr. Plastini, and he was very grateful. Habitat for Humanity is also hosting a food drive all week. Students and faculty are encouraged to bring in non-perishable food items that will be distributed by the Fuller Center for Housing of New York to families in New Rochelle, Mamaroneck, and Yonkers that are in need. A special congratulations to the varsity cheerleading team who had a very successful Sunday morning at Empire Regionals. The girls earned a bid to high school cheerleading nationals at Disney World in Orlando in 2 different divisions. They placed first in one division and placed 6th out of 20 teams in the other. This was a huge accomplishment for the team and a great way to start off their competition season. Another congratulations to senior wrestler Philip Son, who was nominated for Lohud Wrestler of the Week for his undefeated start of the season, totaling 9 straight wins. Be sure to vote for him on the Lohud website or in the link that can be found on Eagle Nation's Instagram. That is all for tonight, and we look forward to seeing you all in the new year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anybody on the board have any questions for our student reps? All right, if you guys want to go home and start decorating your Christmas trees or do your homework, you're welcome to, and you're welcome to stay. Thank you for your reports. Next, board committee reports. Do we have any committee reports? Let's start on this side. Anything on labor relations? Who's labor? You? Yeah, you could just say that we met.
Yeah, the Labor Relations Committee met, and we're having some good, productive conversations about confidential things.
And that's about all we can talk about.
Yeah.
That's fine. But the fact is, we did meet. Anything over here? No. Okay, next. Superintendent's report, moving right along.
Yep, we have
Dr. Glass.
really two presentations this evening and then some general comments. I'd like to start by welcoming Eastchester High School Principal Dr. Jeff Capuano to the podium to begin sharing a little bit with you about the happenings at Eastchester High School. As you know, we do have presentations scheduled from all of our schools. And so Dr. Capuano, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good evening. It's great to be with you tonight. It's nice to be able to share a little bit with you tonight about what's going on at the high school. Tonight what I decided to do was provide a little bit of an overview of what goes on at the high school, especially for our newer board members who may not be parents in the high school yet and had that experience. And then what we'll do is discuss what we've been focusing on this year as a result of the pandemic. Have you ever heard the fable of the fox and the hedgehog? Any of you? The fox was a very cunning creature whose main goal in life was to eat the hedgehog. He devised a myriad of complex strategies for sneak attacks on the hedgehog. It seemed very probable, in fact, that this fast, sleek, and crafty fox would surely get his way. Day after day, the fox circled around the hedgehog's den, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. When the attack finally occurred, the hedgehog, sensing danger, looked up and said, "Here we go again. Will he ever learn?" He rolled up into a perfect little ball, becoming a sphere of sharp spikes. The fox, seeing the hedgehog's defense, called off the attack and retreated to the forest to calculate a new line of defense. Each day, some version of this battle between the hedgehog and the fox took place, and despite the greater cunning of the fox, the hedgehog always won. This is what Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, calls the hedgehog concept. He says that many organizations are like foxes. They pursue many ends at the same time. They are scattered, never integrating their thinking into one overall concept or unifying vision. Collins goes on to say that truly great organizations are like hedgehogs. They simplify the complex world into a single organizing idea, a basic principle or concept that unifies and guides everything they do. They reduce all challenges and dilemmas to simple, almost simplistic ideas. Hedgehogs see what is essential and ignore the rest. We have to be like the hedgehog, focusing on only what we need to do and do it well. The Archilochus quote says, "The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing." Notice when that was written. Not a new concept. So what are Eastchester High School's one big thing? I'm going to actually cheat a little and share two big things with you. And what I'm going to share with you is found on Eastchester High School's seal. This is something that I learned about literally 20 years ago when I began researching whether I wanted to live and work here. And this is one of the things that drew me to this district and to the high school. The big things are beautifully summarized on the school seal, and the first thing that's listed is scientia, knowledge. Scholarship is our primary goal at the high school. EHS offers 25 AP classes and courses for college credit as of today. Last year, 312 students took almost 600 AP exams. That's the largest number of students ever. We increased by 44 students taking APs over the last 5 years. Even with more students taking the AP exams, 81% of them scored 3 or higher, which oftentimes is acceptable to colleges for college credit. The more competitive schools require 4s or 5s on the exam. One thing that's important for you to hear, this is a statistic that I really like, is that the class of 2021, last year's graduating class, 44% of them took at least one AP and scored a 3 or higher on it. And that's important because one of the things we know from a research perspective is that students who are able to challenge at least one AP class and test are better prepared for their entry to college because they've already experienced something similar to a college level class. Another thing I'd like to share with you is beyond our APs, our art and music program, I'm comfortable saying, are among the best, or if not the best, in Westchester County. We have about 700 of our students that are involved in arts and music in the high school. Our business program has about 500 students or enrollees in classes. Some of them are taking multiple classes. It's tough to break out by student, but about 500 enrollees in our business program. Another thing I'd like to share with you related to Scientia and knowledge and academics. Last year, our graduating class got into 1,141 colleges, or acceptances. That's 4.3 college acceptances per student. Scientia knowledge in academics and the arts is our primary goal. That's our hedgehog concept. While being bright and academically astute is important, Scientia is absolutely nothing without fortitudo. Do we want our students to achieve academically? Without a doubt. Do we want our students to access the best universities in the country? Of course we do. Do we want them to someday become leaders in their chosen professions? Absolutely. However, without more moral courage, or what I'll term character, true success isn't achievable. While character development occurs in each of our classes and is modeled by our teachers on a daily basis, it is also fostered through many extracurricular activities and athletic teams. We have over 30 clubs and 35 athletic teams for our children to choose from. And we encourage them to become involved in 2 or 3 of those and get significantly involved over the 4-year period. Through classes, athletics, and clubs, the concepts of discipline, work ethic, persistence, honesty, kindness, selflessness, teamwork, and service to community are reinforced. And the last word on the screen, on the seal, is sapientia, wisdom, which is a combination of knowledge and character, the first 2 words, leading to the ability to make right choices all the time. Everything we do, academically, athletically, and artistically, at Eastchester High School must revolve around the primary objectives of scholarship and character, leading to a lifetime of wise choices. I'd like to share with you a list of colleges that are scrolling in front of you. These are some of the colleges that our students didn't gain access to, but actually attended over the last 5 years. You will notice schools in art, film, and music. Our students have gone on to excel in both the fine and performing arts. There are schools in engineering and math, some of the most prestigious in the country. There are schools in science, with our graduates attending to quench an interest in scientific research. There are schools that train for specific fields, like medical professions or law enforcement. There are liberal arts schools which provide a well-roundedness that some of our students desire. There are local schools, as well as schools located across the country. There are large Division I schools and small, personal Division III schools. There are religious independent schools and secular state schools. On this list are some of the best schools in the country. On this list, in fact, are some of the best schools in the world. You'll notice that our students got into the majority of U.S. News and World Report's top 50 American universities. After this is scrolling, I'll share with you a little bit of the focus that we've had this year. As I began, I said our primary goals are that of scientia, knowledge and academics, and fortitudo, character. This year, since our return from the pandemic, our focus, interestingly enough, has been a bit inverted. While we see academics as our primary goal, we are actually seeing fortitudo as required first before we're able to then go to the academic learning. While many of our students are faring well academically, we are seeing that the isolation of the pandemic has impacted students' ability to work for extended periods and to persist through difficult assignments. We've seen them less comfortable communicating and collaborating with each other in the classroom. We've seen a greater fear of failure and an unwillingness to take risks. Now, everything I just mentioned, those are all typical high school issues. We deal with those every year. But we're seeing an increased frequency of them this year. So what's our response been? I can honestly tell you all that I couldn't be prouder of what our teachers and what our counselors and what our administrative team has done this year in order to try to address these issues. Our teaching staff has been very responsive. They've recognized the issue and issues and have spent a significant amount of time modeling expectations to the students, more so than they've had to do in the past. Typically, we see a lot of modeling for incoming ninth graders because they're not accustomed to high school expectations yet. We're seeing modeling, especially ninth grade and 10th grade, in order to help them in that regard. What does an appropriate answer look like? What does it mean to communicate with one of your colleagues? What does it mean to communicate with a teacher? Eye contact, for instance. I've seen teachers do that. Look at me. Let's talk together. What does it mean to cite a source? What is the difference between plagiarism and rephrasing? A lot of these things, which may seem very simple to you as adults and to me, and to students in previous years, are things that we have to reground them in this year. Teachers have also had to pace assignments a bit differently in order to bring students back up to speed. Things that would happen as a matter of course are not happening quite that way this year. The teachers have had to back up a little bit, refocus, reformat, and reattack. The teachers have also met departmentally to best solve these issues curricularly by targeting the imperative and reducing the less essential. What are the things we can leave by the side right now to hit the essential curriculum, the essential skills? Our second response, the administrators and the counselors always meet on a weekly basis to discuss issues with particular students. This year, it's been much more significant in order to make sure we're capturing every student that has issues. Our instructional support team, which is composed of administrators, guidance counselors, the school psychologists, as well as the school social worker, they've all been working overtime to make sure our students the students' needs are being met who are experiencing difficulties. Students with social emotional needs are being addressed. What's happening in those cases, those students who are brought to us by the teachers with concern will be addressed by the counselor, oftentimes a conversation with the student, oftentimes a conversation with the parents. Sometimes there will be support provided at school. Other times there will be recommendations for potentially other outside resources. Students with academic issues are being more closely monitored. After the first quarter, I'll give you an example. After the first quarter, we took a close look at our students that we were seeing having issues related to failure or low grades or difficulties in a particular subject. In the building, we were able to diagnose 2 areas where we saw difficulty. We saw difficulty for some students in math. We saw difficulty for some students in science. What we did is we targeted those students, and we actually modified teachers' teaching schedules in a way that allowed us to add content-specific workshops for those students that were experiencing difficulty. So now on an every other day basis, we have a greater opportunity to meet those students' needs who we designated after the first quarter as potentially having more difficulty than in the past. We were actually able to add 1 English workshop and 3 math workshops. That's 4 more workshops than we normally have to help meet the need. To conclude, I'll say our job is to maintain our focus on what is important, and it goes to the scientia and it goes to the fortitudo. But while we're maintaining our focus on what's important, we have to keep an eye on the exceptionalness of this particular year and meet the needs of the students where they're currently at. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. No, go ahead, Doc. Anyone have any questions? Yes, Jackie.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you for that report. As someone that doesn't have that age children yet, I found that to be very informative. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Anyone else? No. That was really good, Jeff. Thank you very much.
My pleasure anytime.
Thank you, Dr. Capuano. Much
Happy
appreciated.
holidays.
Thank you. The next portion of the presentation is an update on the hiring process from 2 of our cabinet members, our Director of Personnel, Jeanette Messina, and our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Scott Wynn.
So good evening, everyone. Tonight, Jeanette and I are going to take a couple of minutes, and at the request of the board, we want to kind of take you through the kind of an overview of the hiring process that we go through for nearly all of our staff members. As we'll talk in a minute, everything's a little bit different depending upon the category of staff, but this will kind of cover a lot of the information as we see it. So to begin, we really have 3 categories of staff members. We have classified staff, certificated staff, and our substitute staff. Tonight, we're really going to focus on the certificated staff because that's the largest group of staff that we have within the district. And by its name, you can see this is staff members that hold certificates. So these really are teaching staff and our administrative staff. Our classified staff would fall into basically everyone else that exists within the district. And then, of course, we have our substitute staff, which are our leave replacements and our substitute teachers. But we're really going to kind of focus in on the certificated staff for this evening, but many of the pieces, they really kind of carry over between all 3 categories of staff members. So we'll take you through a general overview, and then we'll dive into each one of these pieces and talk a little bit about each one of them. So the first step is obviously a position creation and definition, where we really define what the position is that we'll be looking for. We then move into a second phase, which is a posting and recruitment. This is how we actually post our positions and how we go about recruiting for them within the different avenues that we use. Then we move into the screening and interviewing process, where we look at each candidate as an individual and see how well they fit as the position creation and definition that we've created. The fourth stage is the actual hiring process and the reference check process. And then we move into the onboarding phase, where we're bringing the person on board and getting them settled within the district. And finally, we move into the mentoring and evaluation. Once they're hired and onboarded, how do we continue their success and measure their effectiveness within the district? So now we will take each one of these and break it down for you so you can have a little bit more information, and I'll turn it over to Jeanette.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeanette Messina, Director of Personnel. As Scott had mentioned, we are going to mainly focus on the certificated staff and the hiring of certificated staff, but many of these processes are very similar for when we're hiring classified and substitute staff. So when we have to create, we have to fill vacancies. First, we have to decide what we need. So this process is done with the needs of each building are evaluated. During the budget process, principals submit their staffing requests during budget meetings. We look at student enrollment. We also look at any vacancies we may have, upcoming retirements, leaves of absences to be filled, and then ultimately we decide if any new positions need to be created. Any new positions that are created are done by a board resolution. It is presented to the Board of Education, and a resolution will appear on a board agenda. This is all done prior to the recruitment process. There we go. Posting and recruitment. So once we know which positions are going to be established, we post internally via email. We post on OLAS, which is the online application system, which is a BOCES-sponsored site for K-12 districts to use as a recruitment tool. We use this tool for both classified and certificated positions. We also expand to other sites such as Indeed for more difficult positions to fill. We also may attend college recruitment fairs. A lot of them have been virtual of late. Hopefully we can get back to doing more in-person fairs. And actually for the second year in a row, the Lower Hudson Council of School Personnel Administrators will be sponsoring a virtual diversity recruitment fair. This takes place on a Saturday in February, and administrators have the opportunity to screen at a fast pace a bunch of candidates, kind of like speed dating. So you get the opportunity to post what positions you have. Applicants will get the opportunity to submit their resumes and cover letters. Then we schedule, we're up to about 8 volunteers so far of administrators that are willing to give up their Saturday to do this. We'll be able to sit, do through Zoom, interview at about 8-minute increments, just get a feel, see what these individuals are like, and if we feel that we would like to invite them back, we'll invite them back for committee-based interviews. Scott and I did it with one principal last year. We really weren't too sure how it was going to go. We thought it was a really great opportunity. So like I said, this year we're up to about 6 or 7 administrators that are going to be joining us, and we look forward to hopefully gathering some great recruits to bring on board some positions we have available. So let's see here. Okay, where are we? So now we are also looking to implement a new onboarding module called Frontline Central, and we hope to have this running in time for the next recruitment season. This will also be another opportunity where applicants can apply, and once they do apply and their resumes and applications are submitted, that electronic file will move on with them through the whole process. So if they're selected to interview, the committee members will be able to access this information electronically, and then the whole process as we move forward will carry from stage to stage, becoming virtually paperless. And ultimately we can take that data and implement it into our HR system. So again, trying to eliminate the paper process, keep everybody informed, and have a complete online record. So as far as classified positions, it's a little bit different, and we can actually be here for hours if we talked about it. Classified positions, we must go through county civil service, and that's a whole different process with a whole different set of rules, which include canvassing lists of eligibles that pass the test for certain titles. But in other instances, we can post and interview and select individuals through these recruitment processes like OLAS and Indeed. Okay, let's see, next. Did I go too fast? Okay.
So the next part of the process is really, for me, the meat and bones of the process. It's the interviewing process. So when we have a position posted, we end up getting a closing date, and we begin to look at resumes. This can vary depending on the position. We had, we can typically have anywhere from 80 to 100 applications. We've had years where we've posted for multiple elementary positions where we've had over 1,000 applicants. So we really do vary in terms of the number of applicants that we get based upon the positions. But that is really the point where we begin the interviewing process. First thing we do is we develop criteria. We want to, based upon the job position, we want to develop what are we actually looking for. The person that we're looking for, who are they? What are the key characteristics that we're looking for, so that as we're screening candidates, we're all really looking for the same thing. In general, we do review all resumes that are submitted to us. It's something that I think is a valuable process, looking at each candidate individually to make sure that we are not missing anyone. There are many districts that generally set criteria within systems. They'll say, we don't want anybody with below a 3.8 GPA in their master's. That can be very limiting in a lot of cases, especially for newer candidates who may not have their master's yet. It may eliminate candidates that we think potentially could do very well. So really looking at each candidate in an in-depth way, I think, is a practice that we have here in Eastchester that does us well in the long term. We then go through a process of screening interviews. These are typically shorter interviews for people that we think would potentially make good candidates, usually about 15 to 20 minutes long, where we really dive in to get to know who people are. These screening interviews are typically done at the building level. They may be done by a principal, maybe with a member of a department or a department chair, where they can really begin to see who the pool is and which candidates they'd like to move forward. The next part of the process are committee interviews. This can take place in a number of stages. There may be one committee interview, there may be several depending on the position. Usually we're looking to move anywhere from 5 to 10 candidates forward from the screening process to go before a committee that's representative of the department that we're hiring for. So this may include a number of teachers, it may include counselors, maybe members of departments, maybe members of teams or grade levels. Typically they're chaired by an administrator. It may be building principal, maybe a district administrator, depending upon the process and what the position may be. And it's an opportunity for us to dive in. These committee interviews are typically anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half in length, and it's an opportunity to really get to know who these candidates are. At this stage also, we're typically asking our candidates to complete a writing sample that is based upon information that we'd like to know from them, and an opportunity for them to get to show who they are as true candidates for the upcoming position. The final stages involve another series of interviews, as well as, if we're talking about teachers, demonstration lessons. So typically we're moving 1 to 3 candidates forward into this final stage, where they will complete demonstration lessons in classrooms, and then go before typically another round of committee, where they are really scrutinized and we examine them at a much deeper level. And then a recommendation is typically made. Usually anywhere 1 to 2 candidates are recommended to move forward in the process, which we'll talk about now. So once we've moved forward a number of candidates, usually 1 to 2 candidates at the final round, this is where we dive into their background. We're completing intensive reference checks on all of our folks. We are calling a series of people from their former positions. Almost in all cases, we are looking to speak to their most recent immediate supervisor to find out what their performance was in their last district. We are completing internet checks. We are completing certification checks and fingerprint clearances to make sure that they don't have anything in their background that would be of concern to us, and we want to make sure we have the best candidates possible. At this point, once we've completed this, final interviews are completed. Those are typically done by either myself, Noreen, or Rob, so that we can really dive in and make sure that we have the best candidate for our position. Once we've decided who that candidate is going to be, a position is offered to the candidate, and salary determinations are made, and salary offers are made, and then some negotiations usually take place in order to come to a final decision of who the candidate is going to be and who we'd be recommending to you as a Board of Education for final approval in the process.
So on onboarding, once we go through this whole process of making a recommendation, the paperwork comes to my office, the HR department, and my staff will again just verify that we have all of the materials there so that we can move forward with a board recommendation. So as you know, every meeting we have a personnel agenda, and on that personnel agenda we include the appointment information, their start date, their probation end date. We also include in the packet for the board members a resume and a recommendation memo from the recommending administrator. We again double check to make sure certification is verified. We do also another check to make sure there are no other concerns. Applicants then, once they are approved, they are brought in to do payroll paperwork, and that's the first orientation session, so to speak, with HR. Then they're brought in to meet with me and Kimberly Mark from my office, and we go through payroll, benefits, entitlements, contract, attendance policies, and procedures, and just basically have a Q&A for new staff coming on board, giving them the opportunity to ask the questions that they may have, also kind of calm them a bit and let them know and reassure them that we are here for them during their process. There is also a certified staff new staff orientation, which takes place typically just before the start of school, right around the time of our professional development days. Okay, turning it over to Scott.
The final step in the process is really making sure that whatever staff members that we hire are going to be successful moving forward. For our certificated staff, the largest part of that certificated staff is our teachers, and we have a formal mentoring program for our teachers. It's 2 years in duration. Those teachers are assigned a mentor from within the district, typically a veteran seasoned teacher who is doing a fabulous job and is willing to work with a new teacher. They meet with that new teacher for 45 hours per year. And in the first year, there's also a mentoring course that's 5 sessions in length that I run, where we talk about the challenges of being a new teacher, the challenges of being, of looking at what teaching really is about, and we look at best practices across the board in being a successful teacher over the course of the years. And of course, there's informal mentoring. There's opportunities for teachers to learn at all times that really applies to all staff members across the district, where they're working with their colleagues in order to find the best ways to navigate the challenges of every single day. And of course, there's the evaluation process. All of our different units are evaluated. They are evaluated in slightly different ways, and we're not going to get into all the details of each contract and how they're evaluated, but you should know that teachers, teaching assistants, full-time support staff, and administrators are all evaluated every year by the administrative staff, so that we can determine how our employees are doing, if there are areas of need and areas of growth, as well as being able to celebrate the excellent job that many of our teachers are doing on an everyday basis. So that's the hiring process in a nutshell, a quick overview for you. So we open it up to any questions that you may have about the process.
Thank you both. Anybody have any questions? Yes, Christy.
Hi there. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time to outline the process. It was very helpful for the new members to really see the process that's taken. It's a very in-depth process, so that was really very helpful. I don't know, Vito, if we want to highlight the fact that a board member or two will be sitting on the hiring committee.
Yeah, you can mention that.
We made the recommendation that for particular levels for administrators, I call them executive leaders of the district that have oversight for significant decision-making, to have at least 1 or 2 board members sit on the hiring committee for that process. So we're looking forward to that. So I really appreciate, and I thank the board for that consideration. I thank the team, Jeanette and Scott, for putting this together as well.
Yes, Cheryl.
I'm sorry if I missed this since I came in late, and if I did, you can skip it, but I don't remember seeing it on the pre-circulated PowerPoint. Could you talk a little bit about some of the priorities that you use in making hiring decisions, say a new teacher? What are some of the lenses that you're thinking of when you're differentiating between, say, the top 3 candidates?
So that's kind of a hard question because it differs by department, it differs by grade level, it differs by really what kind of the state of whatever department or school kind of exists at that time and what the needs might be. Depending upon the position, I would say that we're obviously, to me, we're looking for people that are going to connect with kids. I feel like I've gotten to the point where within the first couple of minutes you can really tell and get a feeling for someone if they truly connect with students and are going to really do their best at making sure that our students are successful. Obviously, we're looking for somebody who is intelligent. We're looking for somebody who is well poised and is ready to take on a challenge. I don't think, I am not someone who looks at resumes and say this person doesn't have any experience and they're disqualified. Being someone who was offered a first-time job out of college, I really do respect the fact that each candidate brings something different to the table, and that's really where that screening process begins to separate out who we feel would be most appropriate for a position. So it's very hard to kind of generalize that comment, but those are some of the beginning things that we look at.
Okay. Yes, Christy.
Where did my speaker? Oh, it's on here. Can you hear me? Yes, it looked like it fell off. No, I appreciate actually that comment from that you're not, you look at a resume and they may not have per se the documented experience, and but through the screening process that you can get, I call that a gut feel, right? A gut feel, the connectivity that an individual would have as you're speaking to them, the enthusiasm, the passion for their expertise that they have, and that you can kind of assimilate that to how they would be, in front of a classroom or what have we, or working with the folks, working with the community, et cetera. So I really applaud that aspect of the interviewing process and the screening process, I should say. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. And I think another thing that a lot of people within our fields take for granted is a cover letter. I spend a lot of time reading people's cover letters. I think the way you write and the words that you choose say a lot about you. And when you get a very generic cover letter and a very generic resume, to me that says something about you. But when you really tell us who you are and who you are as an educator through your cover letter and through your resume, I think that really says a lot about you and kind of raises you to a different level, and at least gives you an opportunity to come meet us and to show us if that's really who you are.
Okay, anybody else?
I just have one more quick question.
Sure.
You might have covered it as well, but can you give us I know that it varies a great deal, but at what point do you start the hiring process for the next year? In other words, when do you start knowing, okay, we have to post this job? Like, what's the season? And I'm sure a lot falls out of the season, but can you frame the season for hiring a little bit?
I think the season starts usually right about now. We're at that point where we're beginning the budget process and really dive into what our needs are going to be. We begin to see the trickling in of retirement letters usually around this time. And if we're determining that we're going to need new positions, this is really the time that we're beginning to think about what those positions might be. I would say that by the time we get to the end of February, beginning of March, we are pretty well thinking about and knowing what that's going to look like and that's when we try to begin the recruitment process and the job creation process.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
That was very good and helpful.
Thank you. Just wanted to give you some general comments and some updates. I want to talk just briefly about, of course, COVID update. We had 22 cases last week. That was a lot of cases, our highest week ever, and we've seen a big jump in recent weeks. We had 8 yesterday, and we've had more today. I don't know what the weekly total will be this week, but we're hoping it stabilizes. You should know that Eastchester right now has the highest 14-day case per 100,000 out there. Right now in Westchester County, we're up at the top. So we are seeing a little bit of a spike, and we are calling on everyone to do their part, everything they can to try to use mitigation strategies, both in and outside of school, to keep the spread at bay. It is not unusual to see an uptick in cases at this time of the year. According to the county, on a call I was with them on yesterday, last year's trend showed increases up through about the middle of January. So if we see the same trend, that might be something we could expect, but we would hope to see a leveling off or a tapering off after that point. And so we just want to make sure that we're doing our part with regard to the mitigation strategies that we have at hand. The state very recently gave us a new set of, it seems like every couple days, beginning the middle of last week, we got some new regulations. We had been waiting. As you know, the state gave us the ability to consider doing a test-to-stay program, which, I'll just reiterate that a test-to-stay program is a program that allows someone who's been a close contact or exposed to an active COVID case to test with an antigen rapid test every day and in school, and then that person would be able to stay in school as long as they tested negative. The state gave us the ability to do that if a county would grant it. Our county granted it, but our county didn't give us the green light and all the details and the regulations and guidelines that they wanted us to follow locally to do that until just very recently. So now that we have that, we are hoping to put into place a test-to-stay program for when we get back from the break. We have a nurse secured to do this. We have to hire a couple other support people to do it. We will have one location within the district at which this can be done between 6 and 8 a.m. And that will allow all of the students in the district who would be in that position, so let's just call it roughly about 20 per week. It seems to be what it would be averaging at this point, to come in that 2-hour window, take the 15-minute rapid antigen test at the car side, and then receive their positive or negative result. And if they have a negative result, they'd get a slip that would allow them to come to school that day. If they received a negative result, they wouldn't be able to come to school that day. So we think that that's something we're going to be able to put into place. We do expect to get rapid antigen test supplies initially from the county. We don't think that those supplies will last forever. Therefore, we are also trying to buy supplies from local outlets, and we have a line on some that we are able to purchase, so we're going to seek to get this in place. I want to thank everybody for their patience. I know we would have liked to have this in place sooner, but it's just not been possible. Very few districts have this operationalized, just 1 or 2 in the county who have just started this week. And one of those districts has a very high number of cases and really needed to get this started a little sooner. I also want to let you know that the state has given local health departments the option to use antigen tests for symptomatic individuals, but locals are not obligated to do so. So our locals have not yet given us the green light to do that and the authorization to do that, but I am anticipating they may. So that would be a real game changer. If you could have someone who is symptomatic, right now they have to take a PCR test in order to, be cleared. This would allow you to use a a rapid antigen test to do that. So if that actually is something that the county elects to do and allows us to do, that will be yet another thing that we might consider. But that is very new and yet not authorized, but it's something to keep on the horizon. We're going to be also on our gateway testing, or our testing monitoring program, which we have about 200 people a week involved with. We'll be resending the enrollment form for that weekly testing option on a Google form, which I think is going to be a little easier to register for. And if we can, we're hoping to increase the participation rate, especially when we return, so that we have more people. We can actually open it up so that every single student could have it. Of course, theoretically, it is open to anyone who wants it, but we're hoping to get a much higher participation for that week coming back, so we catch a number of cases that, we call it gateway testing, coming back in, try to get everybody tested coming through the gate, right, so that you catch everyone. I don't think we'll get 100% by any means, but we will offer it, and we will make it a little easier to enroll in that program. We've caught 4 cases so far through that program over the last several weeks. We are also working with our advocacy letter that we talked about at the end of the last meeting, and we've shared drafts back and forth, and that advocacy letter is something up for discussion later on in this meeting, so we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I just want to remind everybody that in that advocacy letter, thus far we had 3 main points we were focusing on. One was to ask the state for positivity rate metrics that would enable us at some point to not have masks. As you know, the governor just yesterday instituted a mask mandate for all schools again, and not just schools, but other establishments and conditions. But I think it's important for us to all have a view toward what would it take behaviorally for us to get those rates down. At what point would we be then able to not have the masks? I think that question is one that should be answered and is worth advocating for. The other thing was, asking for assistance with test to stay. Test to stay is not an easy one to pull off on our own, and the more help we can get on it, the better. And the third bullet point that we put in that draft letter was, because the notion of mandated vaccines is certainly not something embraced by everyone. It is a contentious issue. We feel it's important, at least what I attempted to draft in the initial letter was, at the very least, let's make the information and the vaccines widely available so that people who want them can get them. And so we went at least that far in the letter thus far. But I think, again, that is something we'll hopefully discuss a little bit later in the meeting. So I also want to remind everyone, if a letter hasn't gone out, I think it may have gone out, or it will be going out shortly. Just reminding everyone about an initiative put up by the district attorney's office and here in the county of Westchester, and the DA's office is asking all schools to send out a reminder that just for home gun safety reminders. We've had the incident in Michigan, as you know, has been something that has shaken us all to our core. And making sure that everyone understands what the law and the expectations are for anyone who is a gun owner to store that gun responsibly. We sent out a letter just reminding people of that important information, not to intrude into anyone's personal affairs as to gun ownership, but just to say those who have guns, there would be in the interest of school safety to store them in line with the law. So that reminder either will go out tomorrow or has gone out. I know it was something we scheduled to do this week. And when you see that, I wanted you to have the background around it. Lastly, we have our last meeting of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force tomorrow night. We're almost finished with our recommendations. I anticipate being able to send out at least some of the initial recommendations to the community very shortly after we have that meeting, so that people can get an idea. I think people are going to be pretty pleased with the kinds of recommendations that are coming out of the committee. They are really education related and rather common sense, and actually flow very well with good educational practice. They are, I think, very sound, and our community really took ownership in that process. So we'll get those out to people, and then we will present those to you at the January 11th board meeting, so that, and we'll have members of the committee come on in and help us present and to share with that really just some general direction, some ways to go that they think make sense for us, and then you can see how those sit with you as a board and as an administration, and we can maybe take some of those and start working on them down the road. And then likewise, we are going to be finishing up our strategic planning recommendation for everyone on January 25th. And at that board meeting, you'll be receiving those. And we may be able to get some of those out ahead to the community as well to kind of see. We just got another draft back from our last bit of work last week, and we're almost at the finish line with this. And I'm really encouraged about this because, it's a time to move forward and build. This is a time to Dr. Capuano's, to build on his point, to have clarity around some things that we're really heading toward as a district, to reframe that and refocus it, and then be able to channel our energies in that direction. So I think the group of about 27 people who are on that committee did really good work, and this will be something that will allow us to move forward. So I'm excited. This is a culmination of months worth of work that we'll get to really talk about in more detail. And then, in some respects, the real work will begin, to execute what these things will be, and to take a chunk of it and say, okay, for the next year or two, this is what we're going to really focus on. Because there's 5 or 10 years worth of work in these kind of plans typically. And so you want to take the most important pieces out of that and say, here's what we'll commit to for 22-23. Here's what we'll commit to for 23-24, and be able to map those out so that we can move in those directions. Very exciting. And right on the horizon, January is going to be a big month. It's going to be a lot of fun. And that concludes the general comments of the report. Can I ask you questions?
Go ahead, Steve.
When you were talking about the possible expansion of the test to stay to symptomatic students, is that symptomatic students who have been exposed? Is it symptomatic students who just happen to have a headache and go to the nurse, or is that all of the above?
Well, it's not really an expansion of test to stay necessarily. The test to stay is asymptomatic. The ability to use a rapid antigen test for a symptomatic student is something that we may get, and then maybe that's what you're referring to. And that is something I think I have some questions about that as well, because I don't know that it's something that would be repeated every day. I think it would be more of a one-time event, but I think there are some, all of the things that we have been doing around that, which would be to examine, was there a pre-existing condition, right? Is there another health condition? What kind of symptoms are they? Is it fever, right, or not? And those kind of things all would play in, because you might be dealing with another illness that is mirroring COVID, and I think it should play out, I think, theoretically much like any other PCR test you would use. But there could be some caveats to it because of the lack of the lower accuracy of that test that I would want to understand a little bit, and we want to talk to our medical director about. But if we can do that, it's worth exploring, because it would give us an avenue to, keep children in school, hopefully safely. And there may be some ability or necessity to repeat that testing at some interval. But right now, they're just saying you can use it in place of a PCR. I mean, that's what the state is saying. The locals have not given us the green light yet.
Do we have any idea as to when the local health department might make a decision on this?
No,
or
I don't know yet. I think if it follows kind of the form, it's probably several weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. We want to discuss the School Board Association Area 10 Rep nomination. Rob, you want to fill us in on that?
Sure. So we have given you the names of 3 individuals, Cheryl Brady from White Plains, Deborah Gotti from North Rockland, and Frank Harriton from Ardsley. These are 3 names that were put forth to fill a vacancy for the Area 10 Director of the New York School Board, NYSBA, and New York State School Board Association Board of Directors. It's a 2-year term, and these candidates are being nominated. Our board has the opportunity to agree upon one candidate you might want to vote for, or you can say, you know, I don't know much about any of these candidates, and choose to not vote for anyone. I'm giving you the names now, along with the background that we've kind of found on their websites, and I've given that to you. And I think this is something that we have until the end of January to decide upon. So I wanted to give it to you as soon as I received it, so you'd have the opportunity to do a little research, homework, maybe talk about it. We could talk about it in an executive session if you'd like. We could talk about it in an open session if you'd like. You may want to do something less formal. But right now, I don't have a recommendation, and I don't know that any of you maybe are at the point where you would. But you have the opportunity, and one of the things that we'll ask us to do when you vote for someone is to note the Board of Education meeting date that you discussed it, just so you know you can say that you did. So, you know, maybe in one of the next couple meetings, you may want to take this up again in some form or fashion. I just wanted to make you aware of it.
I think what we should do is just let everybody do a little bit of research to see if they know any of these people. We'll come back in January, and then we'll talk about it. We'll put it on the agenda for then and see if we want to recommend or vote for somebody. You know, being that we literally know nothing about these people.
Right.
You know?
And the only information that we were able to find for you is what was publicly available on their website, and you do have that. Lori found that. She did a terrific job and made a direct connection with NYSBA and said, hey, you know, it would be helpful if we had a little background. And they said, well, sure enough, we'll put that together. So they're doing that, right? I think they're going to do that at Lori's request. So when we have that, we may get more that we can give to you, if you would like it. All right.
That brings us up to our agenda. And so I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask for public comments on agenda items only. So if anyone would like to talk about anything on the agenda, you know, please come up to the mic, give us your name, your address, and just please keep in mind that we try to keep it to 3 minutes. Our timekeeper is here.
Oh, yeah, I will go.
That's all right.
Hi, it's Jen Harrison, 90 Park Drive. My question or comment goes to the committee that's hiring teachers. Now, I came in late because I was at the concert, so this may have been addressed, so forgive me if it was. But I would really, really like to know who's on that committee. And whether or not they're attuned to the diversity issues that when you go to hiring a teacher, because honestly, Eastchester is known as a place that's not for teachers of color. They don't come to apply because they know what has happened in the past. That's real. From teachers. So I'd like to understand what is being done to address that, to understand that what the needs of different kids are in terms of modeling, in terms of the exposure, and all of those kinds of questions. That's, you know, the comment I have in terms of what has been said to date. Thank you.
Thank you. To come up? Doesn't look like anybody. Okay, going once, going twice. All right, sold. All right, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Who would like to move the consent agenda? How about you, Cheryl?
Sure.
Takes you to a bad spot.
I have to change my glasses.
Before we do that,
Sure.
an error on the consent agenda, don't we have to put 13 separately?
Yeah, 13.
Yeah, we're going to do 13.
It's listed in the thing
Oh,
as
it's
part of
still?
the consent.
Okay, so we're going to do the consent agenda,
I would have emailed, but I had a...
less item 13, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up.
All right, so be it resolved that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda, which includes the following: 9, approval of minutes; 10, personnel agenda; 11, Committee on Preschool Special Education recommendations; and 12, business office recommendations.
Okay, Christie, would you like to second that? Sure. Okay, since nobody removed anything from the consent agenda, all in favor? Aye, that's everybody. All righty, thank you. Moving right along. Now we have the resolution 1301. Tudor, would you like to do that? Now, in this one, we have to do a roll call on the vote. So if you could just move that.
Am I reading the full thing, or am I just reading the highlights?
You could say yada, yada, yada as attached.
Well, I'll be a little more formal than
Yeah,
that.
you know, read the first paragraph and then yada, yada it.
Well,
Otherwise, we'll be here all night.
I'll move the resolution of the Eastchester Union Free School District, New York, to be adopted today, December 14, 2021, calling a special district meeting to authorize the expenditure of monies for school purposes and the levy of a tax therefore, as itemized in the attached. How's that? Do you need me to read more than that, or does that work?
Okay, that's it. Steve, would you want to second that? I'll second that. Sure, okay, we're going to do a roll call on that, so I'll start down here. Jonah?
Aye.
Aye. Chrissy? Aye. Steve?
Aye.
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 Okay, that's it. We all copacetic with that one, Lisa?
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we'll skip the future meeting. Okay, now the next discussion item is the advocacy letter. So why don't we, all right, I'll start on that one. We have a letter that was drafted by Dr. Glass that was circulated to the board, and so we're now going to talk about it. So I believe the original draft, some comments from the board were that most people were in favor of it, the way it was written, and then there were a couple of little edits that we wanted to make. So I'm just going to go around the table. Actually, I'll start, okay? The first bullet, okay? The first bullet is please consider providing, and I actually cross out the words, I'm sorry, but positivity rate thresholds that would enable schools to operate safely. Well, originally I liked that language, but I think what's going on right now is that I think if we're going to advocate for, I think it's important to advocate for thresholds so that we could operate safely without the need to continue wearing masks indoors, which is what we're trying to say here. But I think asking for positivity thresholds might not be the right thing to be asking for, because right now, with the new variant, positivity thresholds could be going up, and we might never achieve what we want to achieve, which is relief from wearing masks indoors. So I'm going to suggest that we reword that to, and I don't know how to reword it, but I would consider something like, please consider giving us a plan that would enable us to operate safely without wearing masks indoors. I don't know what that plan is.
If
Yeah,
I may,
Steve.
I would suggest, I like where you're going with that. I would suggest maybe metrics/threshold.
Yeah, metrics, whatever.
Take out the term positivity rate and just
Yeah,
put
because
metrics/thresholds.
I think that's really the wrong thing to ask for, because positivity rates could be going up, and, if the sickness is less and nobody's less people are in the hospital. I just looked at the Westchester County deaths. Since last April, it's still averaging 0 or 1 a day. So the positivity rates could be going through the roof, but, what does that mean? I don't know. So I'm just going to suggest that we reword at least that, and now I'm going to, please, guys, I love the fact that you're here and supporting that, but just hear the whole thing, okay? Let us come out with what we got to do here, because we're trying to do this in public. So, but I do appreciate that. Thank you. So let's go. I don't know, do we want to start around the table? I know, Jonah, you want to talk about the last paragraph, so I'm going to leave that last, okay? So is there anything in the base letter that anybody sees that they might still want to change at this point? I'm just looking this way. If you could pop up your hand after I go around. Go ahead.
I think I also wanted to just discuss that last bullet point to maybe, in a very diplomatic way, more explicit.
We're going to talk about the last bullet point
the
separately,
beginning
because
part
that's,
of that? Yeah.
Jonah had some ideas on that, and but basically on the first two. Let's talk about the first two bullets. Does anybody else have anything in there that they have issues with? Yes, no?
I mean, I just support your notion of...
I'm sorry?
I support your notion of the change that, I guess, that Steve recommended based on your feedback, which is to, instead of using positivity rate, consistent metrics and thresholds.
Yeah.
We might add to that just metrics, thresholds, and explanations, right? Like some justification or explanation as to why this is the metric, this is the threshold, because it gives us more understanding and language to be working with.
I was trying to say a plan because I think if we ask for the metrics, we have to recognize that those metrics might change over time. But the whole plan should be that we want to get the kids out of masks. That's where we're trying to get. And we shouldn't be telling them how to get there. They should be telling us how to get there. So that's where I was coming from. So you got what we're trying to say on that?
I'm taking notes, I got it, thank you.
Okay. So everybody's okay with the first two bullets, roughly?
So I had a question.
Go ahead.
In a similar vein, on the second bullet point, it's asking for, please consider providing state-level technical assistance. Do we want to expand that to technical, operational, financial?
Or just leave it.
Or just as assistant, right, state-level assistance.
You want to say technical and other assistance?
Yeah, I'm just,
I don't know.
I'm just asking, I don't really carry the
we're
language.
really
I'm okay with the
wordsmithing, yeah.
language, I'm just asking if the intention is to go beyond that.
I would ask for money, but
But that's the point, right? The assistance can come in any number of forms. We just want appropriate assistance. And maybe that's the word, is appropriate.
Do we have to designate it as technical?
yeah, I like
that's what I'm saying.
appropriate.
Let's put it
Technical, right,
I like
Let's say
appropriate
appropriate
assistance.
assistance.
as appropriate, right?
Yeah. Got that one? Okay. Moving right along. Okay, I think we're up to the third bullet now. All right. Jonah, why don't you, because you have basically a full rewrite of this third one, so why don't you talk about what you're trying to suggest here?
So in a nutshell, I wanted to explicitly say that we opposed any sort of vaccine mandate, which this paragraph does not say right now. I'm getting into some of the more details. This paragraph right now says that we acknowledge vaccines as a primary strategy for reducing positivity rates. I'm not sure
Where is that?
in the current letter.
Right, in the third bullet?
Yeah. So I'm not sure where that, whose primary strategy that is. I mean, I'm not sure that I acknowledge that as a primary strategy. Maybe it is a primary strategy of certain people, but I think there are many strategies to reduce positivity rates.
In all fairness, if we're getting away from positivity rates in the first bullet, we should also get away from it in the third bullet.
Yeah, I concur. Negative health effects or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's take any reference to positivity rates in the third bullet out, because they're not really helping us here.
Yeah.
But the main...
Now go on about your...
The main thrust of my edits was to say that we do oppose a vaccine mandate, and that we also oppose any sort of discriminatory policies. For example, I think there was a letter from some of our legislators that said, we want to remove the mask mandate, but only for vaccinated students, and we think this will, basically coerce people into getting the vaccine. So I would also oppose that per the language that I circulated around. I spoke to Robert Glass. I understand there were a couple of board members who didn't want to say that we opposed a vaccine mandate. I think you said Cheryl and Steve had an issue with that, so I would open it up to see whether any of you want to comment on why.
Before we go there, sure. I'll ask this question. why don't we try to take this paragraph and have it deal with the current law that's in Albany right now that's been sent to committee, and say that we oppose that.
So
You follow what I'm saying? Instead of getting into all these nuances of things that might never happen, but there is a proposal in Albany right now. You follow where I'm going with this? And we'll say that something to the effect of, we'd like to take a position that you do not favor that or sign that, or however we want to say it. So I'm just throwing that out as like some kind of let's deal with the law at hand. Right now, there are nothing in that law says that they're going to create two classes of students, one, a vaccinated and an unvaccinated. If that ever happens, we could take a position on that.
Well, we already have that with quarantines.
Not really, but yeah.
So, I'd like.
Go ahead, Steve. I didn't want to.
I would like to address that. So I like the language that's in here right now, and the main reason being is that it acknowledges that this is a contentious issue. It acknowledges that many families oppose vaccine mandates, and I like that. The problem I have with, as a school district, saying we do not support this as a district is that this school district and this school board represents 20,000 residents in our town, many of whom oppose mandates and many of whom support them. And so I don't think it's appropriate as a school board for us to represent all 20,000 of them on a contentious political issue, in either direction. I would not want to say that we support mandates, and I would not want to say that we do not support mandates. So I like the language that we have right now, because we acknowledge that this is a contentious issue and there are people on all sides of this, and then we acknowledge the difficulty that this presents to a school district operationally. And I think that's really where we should stick as a school district, and stay in the lane of the school district. I think that we have many families and many individuals who feel very strongly in one direction or another, and I would say that those individuals should be writing to their legislators if they feel strongly enough. I don't think that the school district should be doing that in place of those people, right? We represent 20,000 residents, and we know that a significant portion of those residents feel one way and a significant portion feel another. Therefore, I don't think we should get involved politically in that.
Yeah. So since you asked, I totally agree with what Steve is saying there. I think this is a very politically divisive issue and factious issue. So if we enter into this by advocating for one side of it, we are not representing the full community, and a public school district is a district of the community. I think ultimately, my interest, say, even in that first bullet, is not let's get away from masks. My interest is maintaining the safest possible environment where our students can be in school full time. That's been the goal all along. And yes, with the least restrictions necessary. So I am interested in the metrics, the explanations, so we can all understand, and maybe as a community we can start to get on the same ground. I do think it's clearly a political issue. As you mentioned, Vito, there is a bill currently in committee. It's been in committee since May 3rd. It was introduced in May 3rd. It's S6495, in case anyone wants to write against that particular bill. It's been stuck in committee, but since then, there have been at least 5 bills introduced against vaccine mandates that include covering school children and employees of public school districts, and even introducing a vaccine bill of rights that addresses many of these issues that you're talking about. So this is in the legislature right now. All of these bills are in committee. So again, I think that I agree with Steve. I think that this is the kind of thing that individuals might want to write to their representatives. I have the numbers of those bills that are against vaccine mandates that explicitly do include public schools. And so I think that is an individual advocacy measure. We have to acknowledge that this is a politically sort of contentious issue, a very divisive issue. It's been divisive in our own community. I think it's being used used across the nation in ways, being brought to school districts in ways that can weaponize schools. And I think that it's a real dangerous territory for us to walk into and say we are participating in that level of politics, when really what we should be doing as a board and as a district is talking about the ways to, advance educationally all of our students, really think about what the students need right now, think about issues of safety, think about issues of social emotional learning and support that we all acknowledge our students need, think about the kinds, think about the strategic plan and talk about that and not be talking about this issue right now. There is no pending or immediately forthcoming vaccine mandate, so we're, at this point, it feels a little bit like political theater that I don't think represents the needs and interests of our community, of our students, and of our staff.
Thank you. All right, Tudor, I was going to say something, but I can yield to you. I was just going to say, maybe we could make a list of those bills that are pending, because I was only aware of the one, okay? And we could share them with members of the community and the PTAs, and people could, as Steve says, people can make up their own minds.
Yeah.
If you're against bills number 1, 2, and 3.
I'll read them off right now because they're easy to find online. So the bill that is for the vaccine mandate, so it's on TV, you can look it up, is S6495. That was from May 3rd. Since then, the 5 new bills that have been introduced and are similarly stuck in committee are S7268, A7100, S4376, S6747, and S7322. And if you go to the website, you can weigh in right on the website, you can read the comments, and you can register your approval or disapproval. You can also find who's sponsoring those bills and write directly to them, as well as writing, of course, to your local senator.
Thank you. That was very informative. Okay. I'm sorry. No, it doesn't. Ladies first. Ladies first. Oh, I can't say that anymore. Maybe I got to go to him. Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, so while I definitely appreciate your perspectives, I just find it very hard at this point to kind of just turn a blind eye and say, well, because it hasn't happened yet, we don't have to worry about it happening. And I think that it is taking a side of the part of the community that is for mandates by not opposing a vaccine mandate, whereas if you oppose a mandate, you're giving all families the choice. So then I think you're actually not taking sides by opposing a mandate. So I know that, Steve, I think you said we have to kind of stay in the lane of what school districts do. But over the past 2 years, school districts have had to get involved in a lot of health issues that they never had to. So times are changing, and the community looks to us to protect the children. So while they can write to their legislators, they're looking to us as the first point of contact to advocate for them. So I would not feel comfortable being part of something that would just let that happen.
But the divisive issue is that some people might feel that a vaccine mandate would protect children, because there are lots of vaccine mandates now that we do know protect children. So I think that's where we have the division. It's not that everyone should be for choice. I think if you ask, do you want people to have choice over their children's health? Of course, I think everyone can agree on that. But when it comes to vaccine mandates, I do think there are people in the community, and it's not, I think we're probably split, who feel that a vaccine mandate, some even may feel mask mandates right now, right, are protecting the health and well-being of their children as they send them to school, and of the rest of the family when the children are coming home and if they live in a multi-generational household. So that's the division I was talking about.
I totally understand that, and I think that I'm just trying to look at the children as individuals, because I have a lot of friends that have children that have spoken with their pediatricians, and their pediatrician recommended for those children to not get the vaccine. Maybe they have autoimmune issues, maybe they're immunocompromised. We can't say what another parent should be doing and trump the advice that their physician is giving to that family. So that's what I think.
There's actually a bill to that point, which was really interesting in my research, that is specifically dedicated toward protecting medical professionals who give releases to children because of different conditions they have, for vaccinations, for, that they cannot receive a vaccination, so these, vaccine waivers. There was, some medical professionals had concerns that they would be brought up, on some kind of charge. So I think that all of that legislation is pending around making sure that when or if this goes forward, and we don't even know if it's going to go forward, right? Because now we're constantly pivoting with this virus. So I just think we don't have enough information, and at this point, in order to represent the full community, right, as a board that does absolutely thinks about every individual child. And I don't want people to keep their children home. I like that part of the letter. We have to be aware that there might be people who are keeping their children home because of these vaccine mandates. I don't want to get to that point. I certainly don't. But I think this is not something that, as all of these bills are pending, we should be entering into, because it really is a divisive issue.
No, I totally respect that. I just feel like that basically it is our duty to try to protect the individual children.
I agree.
Let's spot on relevant. So I'm not sure if you guys remember, but about a year before COVID, there was a measles outbreak in the Hasidic community in upstate New York and downstate New York. And in August of 2019, New York State actually took away the religious exclusion rights of the Hasidic community to be able to avoid getting, the measles vaccine mandate.
What did you say before? The state did what?
The state actually took away, made a law. I don't know if it was an executive order. I don't remember the details of how the regulation was made. But the New York State took away the rights took away the ability to exclude yourself from the vaccine mandate for religious right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. I think that still holds. And I think that's a problem. It was fought all the way to the Supreme Court as a violation of religious freedom, First Amendment, and it lost. Okay? So I have a problem with setting in motion any law that it's going to get contested no matter which way we go. Whether we say we need choice or whether we say we need, we need mandates. I do think there are exclusions, and I think we need to, in general, personally, there are people who should be able to make an exclusion for whatever the reason, whether it's the thimerosal, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, issue, right? There were all kinds of concerns over the years that have come up regarding vaccines that have led to personal choice against vaccines. And I think that still applies. And I think right now, for some people, the situation with COVID vaccine is that there's personal choice not being forced to take that. And I get that. I don't envy the people who have younger kids who have to, make that very, very difficult decision regardless of a mandate. Having said that, as a school board, our focus should be on the New York State constitutional right for a free education for all students, for all kids in New York. An equitable right for free education. And I think that covers whether you're being excluded because you didn't take the vaccine or because you don't want to wear a mask. We have to advocate for the fact that New York State has to figure out how to guarantee that constitutional right, that it's a state constitution, it's not the U.S. Constitution, but the New York State has a constitution that says every child in New York is entitled to a free education, a free public school education. And if they're going to come up with a law that limits that, they need to figure out how to give those kids that don't want to wear their masks or don't want to get the vaccine the same level of education that the kids who are wearing the masks and getting the vaccine are. I think that's an appropriate advocacy for a school board. And I don't care how they do it, whether that's to not do a mandate or whether that's to open up special schools for kids who don't want to get vaccines or do want to get vaccines or don't want to wear a mask. I don't care how they get there. Right? Because that's not my responsibility. I can't make rules on public health. I'm not a public health expert. But I do think that they have to guarantee that every kid gets that chance to have a free public school education. They don't have to get it. Some people homeschool their kids. Some people send their kids to religious schools. They make choices. But if they're going to go into the public school, they have to be able to get a public school education, whether they're wearing a mask, whether they're not wearing a mask, whether they're vaccinated, whether they're not vaccinated, whether they're exposed, whether they're not exposed. New York State has to figure that out. And that's where I stand on this position. So I am against specifically recommending vaccines one way or the other, but I am for advocating for equal access to education.
Okay. Yeah, Chrissy, we haven't heard from you yet.
I agree with you, Judah, and I like the way I sent all of you the copy of the Bay Shore advocacy letter. And one thing that I like that they wrote, their wording was, and this I think does come under a board's responsibility, our goal remains to have all students continue with in-person learning, and any vaccine mandate would adversely impact that outcome. So I think, we're talking about our goal is we want students in school, and I think any sort of vaccine mandate would impact that. So I think that is in our lane to say, and I like the way that they worded it. They're not saying whether they are for vaccines or against vaccines, just that a mandate would affect in-person learning. So I don't know what you guys think about that line, but I like that particular line.
Well, quite honestly, that is our goal this year. Our goal is all along to be in-person learning. So
I think we say that in a different way in here. We wrote here, educationally and operationally, our district must be concerned with the potential impact of vaccine requirement. It just moved. Educationally and operationally, our district must be concerned with the potential impact of a vaccine requirement on the number of students enrolled in our schools. I think we do say that, right? We have that in the existing, right? And so I think we acknowledge that. The other thing I do want to make sure I want to respond to Jackie. Jackie, you said something about people within the community looking to us to represent them. I really want to encourage people as individuals to write to your legislators, because school districts do not vote, and school districts do not give campaign funds to politicians. And so a letter from someone who votes and a letter from someone who might give campaign funds is probably a lot more impactful than a letter from a school district which does neither of those. So if you feel strongly on this issue in either direction, I highly recommend that you do not, no matter what this board decides in this letter, I recommend that you write to your legislator as well.
I second that motion, because I have been touting that from the rooftops. No matter what way that you stand on the issue, don't underestimate the impact that you as an individual, as a parent, have at the state levels. So just, I implore to do what you feel you need to do. So I agree with you there, Steve, on that note. The Bay Shore letter, I actually really liked. I liked the fact, although, Steve, you're saying with what we've proposed here, students enrolled, sure, we have students enrolled and they could be learning remotely. I like the fact that they stayed in person. We want in the seats, students in the seats in the classroom. So I like if we could somehow tweak and to also include, the New York State items that you've mentioned, Cheryl. I think it's recognizing that those regulations are out there. They've been out there, and we're looking for some closure, on that. Weaving all of these points in. But I do definitely like the fact of the in-person aspect of the Bay Shore letter, how they framed that up.
So, if I may, I do think that you've all hit on the fact that it does say something very similar, but it says it seems like the way that the Bay Shore letter has been framed, communicates a little something closer to what you're looking for. So in essence, it is hitting with the fact, like, they're sympathetic to the fact that they want students to be in person to experience the state guaranteed education, and they want students to be in person, and they acknowledge the contentiousness. I think they've touched on a lot of these things, so if it's okay with you, in the interest of time, I'd be happy to take I'd be able to take these ideas and try to stitch something together. Or alternately, if you want to do this in a different way, appoint a small group of a couple or 3 or 4 board members who want to, take that primary responsibility, that's fine too. But I'm happy to work a little bit on that 3rd bullet to see if we can inch it a little closer to what I've heard.
It sounds like there might be some small tweaks, like, instead of saying number of students enrolled, we say, to in-person enrollment.
Right.
Or the number of students able to attend in person.
Right, yeah. Something to that. I mean, that sounds like a relatively small tweak, I would say.
Certainly can put the advocacy in the bill numbers.
Hang on, I've been tweaking a little bit of language here, and I'm just going to read this, and I'm not proposing it. I'm not asking everyone to agree it, but I'm just going to read it, okay? And I'm basically reading your bullet, and I just changed a few words. While we acknowledge COVID vaccines are a primary strategy for reducing COVID-related absences, we also observe that for some families, the notion of mandated vaccination remains an extremely contentious issue. Educationally and operationally, our district is concerned, not must be, is concerned about the potential impact of a vaccine requirement on the students enrolled in our schools. That way it covers kids not coming to school if there's a mandate and stuff like that, okay? And then I left the rest of it alone, and I think if we would add in there something from the Bayshore letter about the goal being in-person learning for all students, I think that might be something that's, I don't know, that meets all of our needs. I don't know. Jonah, I'm going to go to you because you're the one.
I want to specifically either say that we object to the vaccine mandate or use the Bayshore language that says a vaccine mandate would adversely impact that outcome. I want to be very specific here and say that, either we oppose it or we think that it will be detrimental.
That's what, I would be opposed to that along the same lines of the reasons before, because I think that other things can adversely impact, other families' choice to send students to school down the line. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with the virus, but I just think it's way too divisive, and I don't support. I don't support sending a letter that takes that clear of a side on such a divisive issue. We're not there then represent for the reasons that Steve laid out.
Okay. To be arbitrator here, the last thing you said about, just read me that last thing in the Bayshore letter. Not the first one, the last one.
Our goal remains to have all students continue with in-person learning, and any vaccine mandate would adversely impact that outcome.
All right, so if we've stated that our goal was in-person learning and that a potential mandate would adversely affect that goal, something to that, you know what I'm saying? How would you feel about something like that?
Because on the other side, like no mandate could affect that goal for other families, right?
Well, there's no mandate now.
I know. Well,
there's no mandate now.
Hypotheticals, right? We're engaging in, again, I just really feel like it's divisive.
I do agree it's a hypothetical.
We don't all have to agree on this. I think the overwhelming majority of this community opposes a vaccine mandate. So why do we have to?
Based on what statistics?
The overwhelming.
We don't need metrics to be.
I haven't met anybody in this community that has come out and told me.
20,000 residents in this community.
Does anybody sitting here say right now, I support a vaccine mandate? Okay,
Please. This is a public meeting that you are observing, okay? Thank you.
I know a lot of people support vaccines,
I don't agree that we should.
Very few support a vaccine mandate, from my experience.
But you have to admit it is a divisive issue, and we don't want this to be divisive.
I think vaccines are divisive. I don't think the mandate is very divisive
We
in this
can't
community.
base this discussion on anecdotal evidence that no one I've talked to, right? Because there's confirmation bias. You might be talking to people who tend to agree with you, and it's anecdotal evidence. You have to acknowledge that, right? So, because you're saying no one I've come across. So we don't have actual, we can't, I think it's a very slippery slope, right, to be saying that we are representing the community because this is what we think based on our exposure to the community that the community wants. When there have been people who have written to the board, we haven't gotten lots of letters, but there have been letters against this idea of writing this advocacy letter after it came up in the last meeting.
So, but what we're trying to do here is try to come up with something that we can all support. Okay? So the goal here is to come up with some type of a letter, a statement similar to what other districts have done, that we could all get behind. I think we're almost there. I think there's just some little tweaks that need to be made that could basically satisfy your position, Cheryl, and possibly satisfy yours. No, Jonah?
I don't really think there's that much difference between what in the original letter, I said educationally and operationally, our district must be concerned about the potential impact of a vaccine requirement on the number of students who would be enrolled, right? And the letter from Bayshore says, in that sentence you were just talking about, says it in a different way, but it's not all that different. Our goal remains to have all students continue with in-person learning, and any vaccine mandate would adversely impact that outcome. I think that's what I was saying in the original letter was, this is such a contentious issue, right? If you do it, there are going to be people who are not going to send their kids to school, and that's going to be a problem, right? This essentially says the same thing. It says a vaccine mandate, right, would adversely impact that ability to have all students in-person learning. So I don't know, when I look at it, those two sentences, I don't think they say a whole lot differently. One definitely has a feel or a flavor, right, that's different than the other, but there's not that much difference if you're looking at it from the lens of keeping kids in school, which we have all agreed on. So I don't know, I don't know how different those two things really are. Go ahead, Jonah, you were going to say something, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's very much different. I mean, one says it'll adversely impact, and the other says, well, we have to be concerned about this. And look around. I mean, it's watered down, it's prevaricating. I mean, what's the point of even writing it?
Well, to be quite honest with you, the point of writing this is to make us feel good, because they're not going to do anything with it. They're going to do what they want to do in New York State anyway. And whatever we write is not going to make a hill of beans.
The Supreme Court, and we're going to be lawyers figuring out just.
It's not going to make a difference. This is to make us feel good. Quite honestly, I call it like I see it, and that's the way I see it.
Well, and that brings up my question is, here we are as a Board of Education spending a lot of time talking about something that I think we've acknowledged isn't even going to make any difference to the people we're sending it to.
I know, but it's what we're here to do, Steve. You're right. We're spending way too much time on this.
We're here to talk about education.
But it is what we are here to do. We are here to make sure that our kids get the best education possible.
Yeah. And
in a safe environment and everything else, to keep them safe and keep them in school and ultimately get this behind us.
And some people feel that a vaccine mandate would reach that end, and some people feel that a vaccine mandate goes against that end.
And
so we are entering into this politically divisive arena. We are engaging, we're willingly walking into the political theater, and I think it's really inappropriate. I think also at this point, in that way, we're having these discussions. You've drafted the letter, revised it back. We've had discussions. We're not necessarily talking to each other. We're talking in factions. We are not in agreement, right? So, and we're not going to, and I understand, well, we don't have to be 100% in agreement. We're a board, we each get a vote, but this is an advocacy letter. It's not a policy decision. It's not another kind of decision that we do need to all have a voice in and a vote in, and I don't think you have full consensus. And I think on the original, I wasn't in support of doing a letter at all. The original letter threaded the needle, as I think is a phrase that you used, Rob. I was willing to get behind it, to concede to it. I thought there was consensus there. I mean, I thought that by the time it had come to the board, it had passed through your hands, that you had brought this issue to the superintendent. You had approved of the letter. We saw it. You said you liked the letter. You said you liked the letter. You said, so we have actually pretty
I made a few edits,
consensus.
and then you complained about it, and they put it back to the way he drafted it, right? I mean, that's,
right, but
it wasn't like we all agreed on it.
had strong consensus. It had strong consensus.
It did not.
No,
we got
it actually did. I got nobody replied negatively to it, the original letter. As a matter of fact, some people said, I like it, I like it, I like it. Then we got a few more examples from other places, and a few people said, well, maybe we could tweak this a little bit this way, and we could tweak it a little bit that way based on what so-and-so wrote, and that's where we are today. So, I'm going to throw the question out. You guys want to write a letter or you not want to write a letter? I mean, my feeling is, You write this letter, it's not going to do anything anyway. It's not going to make the state, it's not going to affect the governor anyway. We're all wearing masks, you know, going into the grocery store again, okay? So she's going to make up her own mind no matter what. It is what it is. So do we want to do a letter, or do we not want to do a letter?
I want to do a letter. I think it's important for the school
All right,
board to
you want to do a letter? Steve, do
represent
we
the
need a letter?
I'm fine with a letter, but I like something like what's written
If
here.
everyone's fine with doing a letter, I'm fine with doing a letter too, but
Districts do a letter, I think maybe.
I agree with that.
It could happen.
then,
So I say we do a letter.
But you had said that you would only do this if there was, you know, agreement and consensus, which I don't think you have.
I think we can
So
get
then
there,
what?
though. I've been through tougher issues than this in my life, believe me.
Can I make a request?
I'm sure we could come up with something we all agree to.
Can I make a request? Dr. Glass, your most recent comment on this was about the notion that either you could work on a draft or we could assign a couple of the board members to work on a draft. I think it's a bad idea to have Dr. Glass spending his valuable time, instead of running our district, spending time wordsmithing and editing, being an editor for a letter that's being signed by the board.
I actually agree with you on that, and I spoke to him today, and he said, don't worry about it. He's got a lot of other things that he spends plenty of time on.
No, I understand that. I understand that. But my point is, I like the idea of maybe setting up, and maybe it should be, you know, Cheryl and Jonah and you and me, or I don't know anybody, you know, but setting up a subcommittee of the people who are sort of on the different sides of this.
I think that's a good idea.
Language that we can all agree on. I still like the notion that, and I think we can figure out a way to word something that says that we have concerns that whatever they do, a vaccine mandate or not a vaccine mandate, or whatever choice they make, they need to take into consideration, they need to ensure access to education, to in-person education.
For all.
For all, right. And I think that, I mean, Jonah, I don't know if you don't agree with what I'm saying, and if it's not strong enough, but I do think that is a pretty strong statement to say, and I don't know if it's too strong, but I think ultimately, I think we have to put the onus back on the governor to say we can't, or this committee, to say we can't make a decision one way or the other until we figure out how it's going to impact the students in our state. And they have to figure out whether a vaccine mandate is going to cause more kids to stay home or a no vaccine mandate is going to cause more kids to stay home. We can't do that. We can't send out, you know, I mean, we send out surveys and they're always, you know, whatever. We get a third of the student population parents to respond, and we don't even get the whole community response. Let's let the state figure out how to implement it, but to ensure that we are not, however they do it, that our kids are not being discriminated against for whatever choice they make.
That's key.
Yeah. Does that seem reasonable?
I do too.
I'm sorry, yes, absolutely, and I was just going to say, why don't we take that approach? Dr. Glass suggested it, Judah just reaffirmed it. Why don't we take like 3 or 4 of us, take this letter, let Dr. Glass take another shot at it, and then we'll tweak it, we'll look at the Bayshore language, and then the goal here is to get everyone to buy into it, okay?
Well, it's a Google Doc. I think we should take another shot
Yeah.
and give it back to Dr. Glass.
Okay, we can do it that way.
With the group and, give like a final sort of.
You all have access to it. I think you all have editing rights, so whoever you
We
want to
could do that. We
I
could
just
do
don't
that.
want them to spend hours and hours wordsmithing the language back and forth because of,
Do you want to own this? Your idea.
I'll be glad to do that. I should warn you that my
It's not going to
travel
get done
times
tomorrow.
coming up may make it hard for me to be in-person meeting, but I'm glad to spend as much time
Not going to
as
get done
possible.
tomorrow. We have
Fair
time
enough.
to do this.
Okay.
We all cool with that? All right? Good? All right. Good, we're done.
Are we all cool with that?
Yeah, I didn't hear any objections. You okay? But the goal is we want something that everyone can live with, okay? Because it's not a policy. We're not voting on it. It's something coming from the board, okay? All right. Where are we now?
So we skipped future meeting dates, so don't forget that.
Yeah, usually we do that at the end. Now we're up from comments from the public. So if anyone would like to comment, 3 minutes.
And are we going to keep the 30-minute limit and then vote on the extra 15 minutes if we have to? Or put it in?
Not that many.
Okay,
So,
all right.
But thank you.
Hi, it's Jan Harrison again from Park Drive. Nobody voted for any of the board members here to represent them in the state, Senate, or legislature. We voted for you to represent our children in the district. This is politics, pure and simple. Whether the state votes to have a vaccine mandate or not, you should be talking to your legislature, your people who you elected, who have been elected to represent us in the state. This is not your business. This is politics. This board has become politically organized to try to represent, unmask our kids. Oh, it's all a hoax. We shouldn't be vaccinated. That's baloney. Your job is to keep track of our kids, to make sure they get a good education here. It's not to represent us in the state senate. That's not your job. And I don't know why you think all of a sudden it is. Now, I could feel one way about vaccinating mandates and other people could find, we all are entitled to our opinion about it. It's not your job or to spend your time going to the state or the governor. That's our job as parents. We should be doing that. We should be advocating for our children one way or another. So you're completely and utterly off base. This is not your job. And I know the last 4 of you who came here came with political notions. Unmask our kids. Let's get their kids back to school no matter what the science says. That's how you got here. We know this. It's no thing that, anybody here, the last 4 who were elected are like, let's unmask our kids. No vaccine mandate. Let's get them back to school no matter what the science says. Your job as a board is not to get into the politics. Your job as a board is to represent what is best for our children here. Figure it out here. How do we do this here? In the context of what the state says, what the federal government says. And if you don't like what they say, vote differently. Go to talk to them. This isn't what your job is. It's not your job. Do you get that? I know many of you don't. But let me say, so let's eliminate, if they say a vaccine mandate, let's eliminate smallpox vaccine. Let's eliminate polio vaccine. What? How about that? Measles vaccine. Let's eliminate all vaccines. Because there are a lot of people out there now that say, because they're getting onto this vaccine bandwagon, let's not have vaccines. Let's let all vaccines be up to the parents. So let's go back to having polio. Let's go back to measles. Let's go back to smallpox. But even George Washington got that right when he issued a mandate. But hey, you know what? Vaccine mandates. We can't have those no matter what the science says. So do your job. It's not up in Albany. It's here.
Good evening. My name is Madison Diaz, and I'm a senior here at Eastchester High School. Tonight, I will be relaying the message of tomorrow's leaders, as unfortunately most members chose not to attend because of their family members' concerns over COVID right before the holidays. I'd like to discuss social emotional learning, or SEL. I'm speaking today to give a student's perspective on why SEL is highly beneficial and could honestly be amped up in this district. Eastchester schools are safe havens and enriching environments, and our students deserve social and emotional support from a young age until they graduate. Just recently, our country felt the fear and grief of a school shooting in Michigan. Today is the anniversary of the Sandy Hook shooting. And just last week, a student made a joke about shooting in our school. We owe it to ourselves to amp up the protocol around the topic of an active shooting with the readily accessible facts that detail how often they're happening. Since August 1st, 2021, there have been 31. A student who survived the Oxford shooting spoke in favor of her high school's active shooter protocols, which resulted in many lives saved. Never in my 7 years at Eastchester have I experienced an active shooter drill.
And yet, every time another shooting occurs, I fear for my life in the event that it could happen in Eastchester. The reason I'm bringing this up in a speech about SEL is because I truly believe that social and emotional resources can prevent shootings and significantly aid students after the fact. Our district's SEL mission statement says, "We strive to become a district where stakeholders are invested in the social, emotional, behavioral, and academic success of all students. Within EUFSD, we focus on building relationships and the capacity for adults to create a positive, welcoming, and healthy environment where students feel known and valued. We want all students to experience high-quality instruction through engaged learning and a safe and supportive environment. A healthy and safe environment is much needed in our schools so that teachers, counselors, and psychiatrists have open doors that students feel comfortable walking through to prevent the kind of thoughts and feelings that lead to school shootings." Thank you.
Hello, Lori De La Parra, 28 Claudette Way. Good evening, everyone. Sorry I came late today. I was at the middle school band concert, which I'm really grateful we could have in person this year. And part of the reason this was possible was because of what you have done, what the state has done, and what vaccines have done to prevent COVID from spreading. But tonight it appears that you spent over 2 hours, again, discussing masks, which none of us like, and vaccine mandates, which don't even exist in the state of New York or Westchester County, neither of which you, as a board, have any control over. My understanding is that this is the Board of Education, not the Board of Health Policy. Can we get back to talking about things you can control? Academics, emotional support for our students, safety in our schools, improving our infrastructure and facilities. For the 10 years that I have lived here, we had a fully functioning board. We passed 2 bonds to expand our footprint and our capacity. We improved the sports field. Now this year, you can't even get consensus to fill an open board seat or to whether or not to write an advocacy letter. I really feel it's time to get back to the work at hand. I really hope you do for all of our children's sake. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adam Weissman, 260 Garth Road. I think it's somewhat unfortunate that people just view this as a political issue. I think it goes much beyond that, especially we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's important to be inclusive of people that have different point of views. I think being inclusive, though, means not thinking that there's parity between one group of people that wants to impose or force something on another. I saw a meme recently that said, if you ever wondered what you would have done during the Holocaust or slavery, you're doing it now. So, you know, we're talking about, hey, school safety and school education and all that stuff. If you're not talking about COVID, you're living under a rock. That doesn't seem like a very informed citizen in the world today. The kids that are growing up are going to have to grow up in this world because it's never going to go back to normal. Newsflash, if you're vaccinated, you can still get COVID. You can still spread COVID. CNN recently reported that 75% of the people that have gotten Omicron are vaccinated. So, with that in mind, you have to be some type of shrill lunatic, some type of dummy, some type of coward, or perhaps just some type of evil to think that there's no parity and that it's not political. Because in a way, if you're saying that it's political, you're the one that's making it political. It's two things. It's a scientific issue, which, as Dr. Capuano was talking about science and medicine, knowledge, right? Science means that if the vaccine works, then you are protected. If you have the choice to do one or the other, then you shouldn't have to worry about what somebody does or does not do. The other thing is, aside from this being a scientific issue, it's an ethical one. An ethical one in that your fear is not a justification to force what somebody else does to their body. No one's saying no measles, no polio vaccines. No one's saying something that stupid, because every person that has a kid in this school district, their kids have received those vaccines, or they couldn't be here. The fear is, or the concern is that nobody knows what's going to happen 10 years from now. No one's had a COVID vaccine for more than 1 year if you got it early. So I think with that, all that said, do a little bit of soul searching and try to be less of a coward, because you are the only people that represent this community on a slightly larger level. And I hope that you can realize that it's not a political issue, except to the people that want it to be a political issue and use it as a cudgel to smash the people that they disagree with. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carmelina Iasillo. I want to start by saying I'm not an anti-vacciner. My kids are vaccinated against the flu every year because the flu is 4 times more likely to land a child in a pediatric ICU than COVID. There is a growing concern in the community regarding the possible vaccine mandate and mass inoculation of children with the COVID vaccine. And when you look at this, you need to look at the risk versus benefit analysis, and it is way off. There is a statistic that 117 children will die from a COVID vaccine-related injury or death to save 1 child from COVID. Granted, 1 child's too many, but that's a pretty impressive statistic. The COVID vaccine uses a new mRNA technology that has never been used in children before, with no long-term data, not one safety study, an efficacy study, and a population that has a 0% mortality rate and hospitalization rate that has been known to cause myocarditis, pericarditis, neuromuscular disease, and clotting events in children, to the point where this summer Pfizer got an FDA, was concerned enough that they got an FDA approval for clot-busting medication, Pradaxa, in children before the FDA approval of the vaccine in children. Children do not clot, by the way. Unfortunately, this vaccine is not as effective as we had hoped. Out of 7 patients I saw yesterday, and this is anecdotal, but there's something to learn about anecdotal, statistics and anecdotal data, because that's all we really have right now. And it's not biased, it's real. You have a vaccinated patient and an unvaccinated patient. You have a positive result or a negative result. So I had 7 patients, 5 were vaccinated with COVID, and double vaccinated with COVID, 1 was triple vaccinated with COVID, and 1 was unvaccinated. So the patients are presenting, patients who are vaccinated presenting at a higher rate than unvaccinated. So I find it very unfair to segregate those who are unvaccinated from those who are vaccinated, and when in reality everyone's getting COVID. So now real quick regarding masks. They are harming our children. These masks are interfering with a perfect immune system that has sustained our species for thousands of years through viruses far worse than COVID. Our children's immune systems are going into low battery mode, and this is what I've been seeing in practice. And speaking to other, colleagues, they've seen the same thing. This summer, I've never taken care of so many colds in the middle of summer that lasted 2-3 days. Instead of lasting 2-3 days, they were lasting 2-3 weeks, short of a month. You want to know what's landing kids in the hospital? It is not COVID. It's RSV. RSV is a respiratory virus that usually affects the very young, but now it's affecting children of all ages, and now it's even affecting adults. Normally, we would be able to fight this virus, but because our immune systems have been suppressed, that's not happening. So I just wanted to, this is really looking outside this narrow COVID lens and looking at the body in its entirety. Our immune systems are not only designed to fight viral infections, bacterial and fungal infections, it's used to fight off free radicals that cause cancer. And, you know, as we sit here, the cells in our body are replicating, and atypical cells and precancerous cells form all the time. We rely on a strong immune system to fight these atypical cells. So we really have to stop looking through this narrow COVID lens and really look at the body in its entirety and think, what are we doing? We're doing this to our children, and you know what we have been doing for 2 years, mask wearing, social distancing, and now possible vaccine mandates, it's not working. And insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. We need to stop this insanity. And I know you say there's nothing you can do. I don't believe that.
If I could ask you to...
Yeah, I'm done. There's got to be something you can do. We as parents have went to legislation. We keep writing legislation. We need the support of a board. We need the support of a superintendent. It would be great if you guys could unite with other districts, as we as parents have united with other districts against these very mandates that are already harming our children. That's pretty much it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrice Gordon, 27 Soundview Drive. School, as I think a bunch of you have said tonight, it's about the kids. It's not about the adults. It is a place for them to learn and be safe. I think it's wonderful, as we all should, that these kids are taking an interest in their own education and coming to the board meetings, which can oftentimes be long and boring. You may not all agree with everything they say, but we should be proud that we have a group of kids here in Eastchester that care and that come here are respectful of the process and that can get up and speak so eloquently and passionately. Again, you don't have to agree with them, but that is what is great about this country. We are all entitled to our own opinions. What sometimes is not so great is the intolerance towards those who think differently. We don't seem to be able to have respectful conversations with each other or to understand those who think differently. Things seem always to go to extremes instead of everyone trying to meet somewhere in the middle. Here I have heard the comparison of DEI to Marxism. It is difficult to comprehend that this is what people are worried about. I don't think these kids, or myself for that matter, have the goal of living in a Marxist state. What we all want is for everyone to be treated fairly, no matter the color of their skin, their religion, their gender, or their sexual orientation. I have also heard the DEI compared with the COVID vaccine debate, which again is difficult to comprehend. One is about acceptance, and the other is about a worldwide health crisis that we would all like to see come to an end. To me, the only thing that the DEI, vaccinations and mask wearing have in common is that they all show that we care, not just about ourselves, but about those around us, all of those around us. Yes, what is great about this country is our personal freedoms and choices, but sometimes these freedoms should be that we choose to do what is best for the greater good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Cynthia Weissman, Garth Road. Speaking about the science, there are tens of thousands of scientists that are opposed to mask mandates and vaccine mandates. One is Dr. Robert Malone, a virologist, immunologist, and inventor of the mRNA technology. He is also a father and a grandfather. And his words are, "I stand by this statement with a career dedicated to vaccine research and development. I am generally pro-vaccination. I've devoted my entire career to developing safe and effective ways to prevent and treat infectious diseases. Here's the thing, before you inject your child, a decision that is irreversible, I wanted to let you know the scientific facts about this genetic vaccine, which is based on the vaccine technology I created. There are three main issues that parents need to understand before they take this irrevocable decision. The first is that a viral gene will be injected into parent cells. This then forces your child's body to make toxic spike proteins. These proteins often cause permanent damage in children's critical organs. These organs include their brain and nervous system, their heart and blood vessels, their reproductive system, system, and most importantly, this vaccine can trigger fundamental changes to their immune system. The most alarming point about this is that once these damages have occurred, they cannot be reversed. You can't fix the lesions within their brains. You cannot repair heart tissue scarring like myocarditis and pericarditis. You cannot repair a genetically reset immune system. There's also another scientist that you guys may have heard of, Dr. Mike Yeadon. He is a life sciences researcher with degrees in toxicology and pharmacology, 32 years in pharmaceutical companies, 10 years in the biotechnology sector, former VP of allergies and respiratory research for Pfizer, independent advisor to over 30 biotech companies. You would expect that he would be pro new medicines of all kinds with acceptable safety. And what he says is, everything your government has told you about this virus and everything you need to do to stay safe is a lie. So that's my point. We are being lied to. When we talk about science, we are only listening to the science that is bought and paid for. Fauci controls $6 billion of research money to our universities and research labs. The pharmaceutical companies control so much more. So we are not getting science. We're getting bought and paid for science, just like we get bought and paid for politicians and bought and paid for media. Thank you.
Hey, Board, Chris Johnson, 14 Innisfree. Cheryl, you had mentioned Bill A Alpha 7829, but I believe that's for college. That's for the college mandate. So I just want to make sure parents that are watching, et cetera, understand that if they're going to write their legislator, it should be Bill A as an Alpha 8378. So it's 8378 is the bill for mandating vaccines for schools.
I don't think I included, what was the number for the college one? Alpha what?
Alpha 7829.
No, I didn't read that one.
Okay, I might have misheard you, but the one that's going to affect this school is 8378. That's the COVID vaccine mandate to attend school, so is the way I read it. And
6495.
Maybe 6495. Okay. Anyways, I agree. We should write, but I also say, you should write a letter too, because you're a voice for the parents, and I agree. Every child should have a constitutional right to get a free education. And right now we don't have mandates, and we're doing pretty good. Like Vito said, there's hospitalizations are pretty low, and our immune systems are working pretty well. Vaccines aren't 100%, and the only reason you have a mandate is to prevent spread. And if vaccinated people can get it, then what's the point of the mandate? If someone wants to get vaccinated, great. If they don't. Personal choice is the only solution. But again, parents should write, and community members should write their legislators, and I believe you all should write a letter that you all agree on, but sends a message that really personal choice, I believe, is the only option. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so I guess we're now done with public comments, so we're up to board comments. Anybody have a comment they'd like to make? Yes, no? Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, just give me a second to get myself settled after fixing the TV. One of the parents out here mentioned the fact that we should be focusing on educational things. We had an email come into the board mailbox. I don't know if everyone saw it. I know everyone has access to it, but we're all busy, about a petition to, do some STEM-related improvements, and I just hope it's on everyone's radar, because I'd like to see us, get back into talking about education.
I personally think we talk about education a lot. We do go sidetracked on this stuff, but we have to.
Yes.
Because this stuff affects our ability to deliver the education, and we've got to, cover both those paths.
We've been talking about education. We've talked about
we have
the
been.
essential bond. We've talked about, curriculum. Scott delivered a great presentation on curriculum.
At every one of our meetings.
It's unfortunate that the that Dr. Glass has become a doctor of medicines, and you'll probably get a PhD in what is it, disease central, whatever the case may be. So we've been forced, our hands have been forced to have to acknowledge where we are right now, so.
Couldn't agree more. Anyone else have any other comments? Yes, Carol.
Along with one of the speakers, I was late because I was at the band concert, and it was a real joy to see our students playing again, and I just wanted to, give a shout out to Ms. Rendy, who put on a great series of mini concerts at each grade level, and really thank our music programs, our music teachers, our arts programs and arts teachers for getting our students back on the stage and doing what they love to do. It was great to see. So just wanted to acknowledge Ms. Rendy for the great work she did, and the students, all the students in all three bands did tonight.
All right. Thanks. Steve?
Yeah, just I wanted to say to the board, to the administration, to the school staff, to the parents, to everyone in the community, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, happy whatever holiday you celebrate, and we'll see you next year.
I got one. Sorry to jump back, but just when I read the bond motion, one thing I don't think I read out loud was the date, February 15th. So I want to make sure everyone's aware that the bond.
Well, we'll be putting that date out from now until then.
Yep. I just wanted to make sure to highlight that.
Any other comments? Okay, just before we go, I just have one comment for anyone who in the public who has not heard yet that we did interview 8 candidates for the open Board of Ed position. 8 people came up, stepped up to the plate, offered to serve this community as a member of the board. The board interviewed them all. After considerable deliberation, we came to the conclusion that with 5 months left, we are going to leave the position open and have the people decide on who will be the 9th board member. So that's just for those who may not have known that yet. And I'd also like to say on behalf of the board, well, on behalf of myself, the board, the school district, just what Steve said, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone, and we'll see you next year. All right, now we need a motion because we have an exec session after this. Yes, I don't know.
For tenure.
Oh, tenure discussion. So, Chrissy, you want to make that motion, and Steve, you're the second. Okay. Good. All right, good night, everybody.
I would recommend maybe use the same room.